Hello everybody. Today inshallah we're going to start a new topic. We're going to talk about something called lean systems. And before we start, we need to understand what's the meaning of lean. What's meant by lean? When we say lean, we can refer to meat. When you buy a piece of meat, it contains some skin, some fats, some cartilages, some bones, and then there is the actual meat that you want to eat. In order to be able to eat the meat, we need to eliminate anything that is not necessary. In other words, we need to remove the skin, we need to remove the fats, we need to remove the bones. So when we do that, it becomes lean meat. So by saying lean meat, it means we removed everything that is unnecessary from the meat, and we have just the red meat that we want to eat. Similar to this, if we want to consider a lean system, in simple words, we look at a system and we remove anything that is not useful and not necessary from that system, and we have then a lean system. So lean system means we go and see a system. We try to find everything within that system that is not useful, that's not necessary. We remove that thing, and we have now a lean system. One may think that when I say lean system, it's something that we can apply only if you work in a supply chain. However, the word lean and the system here is something that can be applied anywhere. So wherever you work, inshallah, there is a chance that you can apply what you learn from this lecture and the coming lectures. Another concept we need to know is that there is no blueprint and steps to follow when you want to understand the lean. So when I teach you the lean, I'm going to give you some sort of guidance, some sort of steps to follow. Sorry, not steps, some sort of philosophy, some sort of principles, some sort of tools, some sort of methods. However, there is no formal steps to follow. So there is no steps in order to achieve a lean system. We don't go and follow step number 1, 2, and then we reach a lean system. There is nothing like that. It's a philosophy. You need to understand the philosophy, and there are some tools. You need to know which tool is useful in which situation, and then you have to think by yourself how to apply the lean concept in your company. In this part of the lecture, or in this handout, we want to answer 4 questions, or actually we want to discuss 4 things. The first one is to explain how lean systems improve internal and supply chain operation. How can you use the lean systems, actually the lean philosophy, how can you use the lean philosophy in order to improve the performance of the supply chain? And then describe the cultures, changes, tools, and techniques needed for implementation. As I told you before, there is no formal steps to follow. So I'm going to teach you some tools. I'm going to teach you some techniques. Then it's your responsibility to try to solve any problems using these tools and techniques. And then I'll teach you how to apply the lean to product design. When you design a product, how to take into consideration the lean philosophy in it. And finally, to recognize the strength and limitation of lean systems. When can we apply lean? When it's not possible to apply the lean, what's the limitation? When you apply lean, to which extent you can apply it? These questions will be answered in this lecture, inshallah. So what's the definition of a lean system? We use several words to define the lean system. We may call it just in time. It's another name. It's an older name for lean system. And also we use sometimes Toyota production system. It's another name for the lean system. So what's lean system? Toyota had a huge problem. The problem is the price and the cost of production of the product is very large. And there is a huge problem when you produce a product and you just store it. It may not be sold. That's a problem. It may go bad. That's another problem. It may become obsolete. It's a third problem. So Toyota does not want to use inventory, especially that according to the philosophy of lean, when you store something, it doesn't improve the product. It doesn't add anything to the product. So Toyota thought about how about just elimination, totally eliminating the inventory. So what was the purpose of the inventory? The purpose was if I produce, for example, Corolla, that's a type of model of Toyota, I need to set the production to produce that Corolla. So we do a setup. And this setup takes a lot of time. It used to take a lot of time. In the past, they used to take a lot of time in order to set up the production to produce the Corolla. And then if you want to change from Corolla to Camry, for example, we need to do that setup once again for the Camry. The problem originally was that when we do the setup, it takes a lot of time. So when we do one setup, we can't just produce one Corolla. We need to produce several products, several pieces of Corolla, several cars, several Corolla cars. And then we do another setup for Camry. We need to produce several Camrys. As a result, we need to store them. So Toyota thought about how about doing this setup very fast. When you do that setup very fast, you can produce just one Corolla and then do the setup once again very fast and do one Camry. So you don't have to produce a lot of items when you do that setup. So as a result, you don't have to store. So basically the problem was doing storage in a warehouse. That's a consumption of resources and that costs Toyota a lot of money, and that doesn't improve the product itself. The product itself does not get any benefit from the storage. So we need to eliminate this one because the original definition of a lean system is to remove anything that doesn't add any benefits to the customer, and storing doesn't add benefits to the customer. So Toyota started to do a new thing which is called now lean. They start to produce when you order items. So when you order a car, I will produce the car, and I don't have to store that car. When you order it, I will make it for you. Okay. Lean systems approach, it's a philosophy. As I told you, there is no formal tools to follow. There is no formal steps to follow. It's a philosophy. It's a sort of concepts of minimizing the resources needed for processes. When you do a process, try to do it using less resources. When you consume less resources, then the result is you consume less money. As a result is your cost is much smaller. So in that case, we only produce in the lean system goods, services that customers want. We don't produce anything that the customer doesn't want. We don't actually do anything that the customer doesn't want. If you ask the customer, do you want to increase the cost because I want to store the product? He will tell you, no, I don't want that. So this is a waste because the customer doesn't want it. As quickly as customers want. And there is a big mistake most of the graduates of our school do. The mistake is whenever we ask them about supply chain or logistics, they try to say it's delivering the best quality using the cheapest cost and fastest delivery. This is a very, very, very wrong principle. We can't be excellent in everything. You can excel in one thing, and the other things we cannot be very good at them. For example, if you want to deliver the product very fast, then there is no way to pay less. You need to pay more. And if you want to pay small amount of money, there is no way to use fast shipping. So we only provide what the customer wants using the minimum possible resources. It's not the fastest way of delivery. It's the delivery method that suits the customer's requirements, with only features that the customers want. Most of the time I ask my students, if I produce a car with a very nice air conditioner, is it something good or bad? Most of the students will say that's something very good. However, if I'm going to sell that car in Siberia, it's very cold already. So this is not a feature that the customer is looking for. So who decides whether this feature is a good feature or not? It's the customer. And I only produce the features that the customer want. With perfect quality. Perfect here is a wrong word. With appropriate quality. With the quality that is required by the customer. If he wants a top-notch quality, then I will produce a top-notch quality. If he requires intermediate quality, I'll produce intermediate quality. So it depends on the requirement of the customer. In the minimum possible lead time, I want to produce it without wasting my resources, without wasting time. So if you can produce it in 10 days and you can improve the process and produce it in 9 days, go ahead and improve the process. Because basically when you reduce the lead time, it means you reduce your cost. It's not lead time here is not the delivery method, it's the production time. So when you can produce in 10 days, if you can reduce this in 9 days to 9 days, then this is something good. Without waste, as we will see later, this is the main issue of lean. Anything that doesn't add to the customer is called waste. So when you do that, this step, or when you do the production, we need to focus on eliminating anything that is not necessary. And one thing that's very good about lean is it depends on the workers. So when you do something, we always try to improve the workers. So with the occupational development of workers. We need to study what is the effect of lean. What does the lean do for improving the performance or the cost of the system? We're focusing mainly on the cost, not the performance right now. Later we'll be focusing on the performance. In order to do that, you need to know that there are two types of costs that we have. If you analyze what's the effect of the quantity you produce against our cost, we'll find that we have two types of costs. We have what's called fixed cost. The things that I'm going to draw in blue is in-house. In-house or without lean. So we do that without lean. So this is without. We have something called fixed cost, and the fixed cost here is a fixed quantity, let's say $1 million, and it doesn't change with increasing or decreasing the production. It's similar to the renting of the land. If you produce or if you don't produce, you have to pay the rent. And there is another type of costs, which is called variable cost. So this is variable cost. Variable cost is the cost incurred whenever you produce one item. So if you don't produce, you don't pay anything. If you produce one, we need the cost of production of one item, which is the material, the direct labor, any cost that is involved in producing the product. If you produce two, then we need the cost of two. This is called the variable cost. And we have what is called the selling price. I'll draw the selling price in the purple. So this is the selling price. Selling price must be larger than the cost. Now, if you add the variable cost, to the fixed cost, you get the total cost. So we add them here, so we draw something like that. That's the total cost. Now we can erase these lines. So when you add the total cost and you add the variable cost to the fixed cost, you get the total cost, which is the blue line here. Now let's have a green line. What happens if you use lean? If you use lean, then we don't have to produce more, we don't have to build a large inventory, a large warehouse. So in other words, the fixed cost, instead of buying large resources, we only buy enough material or enough resources to produce what you want. We don't buy more than that. So in other words, the cost will be much smaller. So here is case number 2, the green one is case number 2. So the fixed cost here is much smaller. However, the variable cost, because you're producing smaller quantities, you don't have to produce all the items and store them. You only produce what is needed now. So you produce small items, and then you produce another product, and then you get back to that product and you produce smaller items. So you just produce small patches. You don't want to store, so you produce small. So when you produce small, the cost of one batch is larger. The production cost is larger than the previous case. So we'll find that this is the line, it's going up. Now compare this price, or the green one, to the blue one. Let's erase this one now. Compare the green one. This is the green one here. Compare it to the blue one. They meet at this point. What is the meaning of this point? Before this point, the cost of the production using lean, which is the green, is smaller than the cost of production. Here is the green line, is smaller than the cost of production of the blue line. So if you produce smaller than this amount, using lean will be better. But after this point, the production or the production cost of lean, here is the production cost in lean, is higher than the production cost without lean. In other words, for this region or for this part, it's better not to use lean. So this is not fit for lean. In other words, if you want to produce small quantities or moderate quantities, the best practice is to do lean, and you don't need to store items. But if you're going to produce large quantities, like if you want to produce bread, it's not recommended to do lean. You don't produce according to the actual demand. You just produce in accordance to the anticipated demand. You don't wait for the order. We produce the bread and we store the bread, and we cannot do it according to the orders. So as we find from now, or from this graph, in the cost here, before this point, the cost of using lean, the cost of production when lean is used is better than the cost of production when lean is not used. Moreover, have a look at this point here and this point here. This point is the break-even point. So this is break-even point. And this point is the break-even point. This is the break-even point. So this is break-even point in case of using lean, when you use lean. This is break-even point in case, the blue one here, this is break-even point in case without lean. What is the difference? It's pretty obvious that break-even point in case of not using lean is much higher than the break-even point when we use lean. In other words, if the demand is not large or very large, we can get money much faster when we adopt lean. When we use lean, we start earning money from this quantity. But if you adopt or don't adopt lean, then you need to produce this amount in order to gain money after this amount. So gaining money starts from the blue one for case of without lean, and starts from the green one when you adopt lean. In other words, in case of not using lean, you need to produce a lot of items, and you need to store that items, and you need to sell a lot of these items in order to gain money. When you use lean, you don't have to store, you produce small quantities, so you need to sell these small quantities in order to gain money. So this is a huge difference. Then have a look at what happened to the fixed cost. Here is the fixed cost in case of without lean, and here is the fixed cost of case of lean. And what happened to the variable cost? This is the variable cost. The line here is going up when you compare it to this line. When the line is going higher like that, then the cost is larger than the line of this one, for example. In our case, the green line here is the green line, this is the green line, has a higher slope than the blue line. In other words, the variable cost of the green line, lean, is much higher than the variable cost in the case of not using lean. As a result, have a look at that curve. What happened to the cost structure? What happened to the cost structure is that the fixed cost has decreased. So fixed cost decreased. That's when we apply lean. And the variable cost has increased. So variable cost increased. And the break-even point from the previous one, the break-even point has decreased. In other words, if you apply lean, you don't have to buy a lot of material. A lot of machines. You don't need to buy a large inventory warehouse. You don't need to buy a large machine, because we are not going to produce large quantity at a single point. We're going to break them into smaller amounts, smaller lots. So if you want to produce 1 million items, and instead of producing them one time, we'll produce them 10,000 items at a time. So the warehouse is much smaller. So the cost of warehouse will be decreasing. However, when you produce 10,000 times 10,000 products at a time instead of 1 million, the cost of the production will increase slightly, because you're producing smaller amounts, so the cost of production will increase a little bit. However, because the cost of fixed cost, the cost of building a warehouse and the cost of buying a large machine is much higher than the variable cost, then the break-even point will decrease. In other words, when you produce 1 million, you need to sell at least 800,000 to gain money. But if you produce 10,000 items, you need to sell 5,000, for example, for each lot. So this is the cost structure of the effect of the lean. As I told you before, lean is built upon 5 main principles. And these are philosophical principles. Some principles can be applied only in certain supply chains, and some principles can be applied in any supply chain, and some principles can be applied everywhere. So wherever you work, inshallah, in the future, you can apply some principles from here. Let's start with principle number 1. And principle number 1 is based on something that you can apply anywhere. It's called specify value. In order to discuss this one, we need to understand and we need to define what's meant by value. When I buy, for example, a t-shirt, and that t-shirt costs me £300, is the value of the t-shirt is 300? How about a t-shirt of 10,000? Is the value 10,000? No, this is the price which comes from the cost. However, the price is if you ask the targeted segment, and one key point here is you need to ask the target customer. You don't ask any customer, you just ask the targeted customer. So you ask the customers that you're targeting that they will be buying this t-shirt. Do you consider the t-shirt worth £300? If the answer is yes, then it has a value of £300. If the answer is no, then it doesn't have that value. So that's the meaning of a value. So when I ask somebody, do you think that this t-shirt that costs £10,000 is worth its value or not? If he answers no, we need first to identify whether he is a customer or not. Are you willing to buy this t-shirt at $10,000 or £10,000 in the first place? If the answer is no, then he is not a customer. You are not targeting that customer. You need to ask your specific customer. So when you ask our customer, do you think that it's worth the £10,000? If he answers yes, then this is called a value. So that's the definition of a value. So when we define a value as whatever the customer wants or needs is called a value. Anything that is not needed is not a value. So we say that customers determine the value. Customer is the one who's responsible for determining the value. So when we produce anything, we must provide products, services with customers' desired outcome. What do you want as an outcome from our product? What do you want as a service, as an outcome of our service? So that's something the customer needs to identify it, and I need to understand it. Anything that is not required by the customer is not a value. Then what features the customer is looking for? If he is not looking for a certain feature, then it's not appreciated by the customer, then it's not worth, then the conclusion that it's not a value. Same for the function, the functionality of the product. Same as the capability of the product. So as a result, anything that doesn't add value, which is defined and determined by the customer, is considered a waste. Anything that does not add value, and the definition of value is whatever the customer needs or wants according to his own opinion is considered a waste. For principle number 2, to recall, we're covering the 5 main principles of the lean systems, and we covered so far principle number 1. In principle number 1, we say that customer identifies the value. Customer identifies what's important for him. And then principle number 2 is identify value stream. Because we're doing processes in a supply chain, the process can either be a process that is adding a value, so this is called value adding activity. It's a process that's adding value. And there are processes that does not add value, so it's called the waste. We called it a waste, and we can call it as well non-value adding activity. So we have 2 types of activities: non-value adding activity or value adding activity. When we try or when we have a non-value adding activity or a waste, it's by self most of the time, it's not a root cause, it's a symptom. And by saying a symptom, it means it's not the problem itself. It's an indication that there is another problem that is causing that waste. For example, if I have a headache, then when I take a pill of Panadol or Tylenol, then I'm not actually trying to solve the root cause. I'm just trying to solve the symptom of the problem. I have a headache. Headache in itself is not a disease. Headache in itself is a result that there is something wrong in your body. Maybe you didn't sleep well. Maybe you didn't drink. Maybe you're exhausted. So headache is a symptom of another thing. It's an indication that there is a root problem. So when you take a pill of Tylenol or a pill of Profen, you're basically trying to solve the symptom, the headache itself, but not the root cause. If you solve the root cause, the headache will not occur again. But if you solve just the problem of having headache right now, then you're just solving for now, and that doesn't solve the problem in itself. Now, if we want to try, or if you classify the wastes, you'll find that number 1 is what's called overproduction. Overproduction is producing more than needed. If you want 2 items, we produce 3 items. If you want 5 items, I produce 10 items, for example. And the problem of this one is that the production itself occurs in what's called lot size. So for example, when you start the machine, you need to produce 50 items, for example. So if the demand is 45, you need to produce 50. That's the way we're doing business. However, we need to understand that there is 5 items or 5 products that have been produced in excess to what is needed. That's more than what's actually needed. So this is called an overproduction waste. You produced more than what is needed for the customer. The second process is something called weighting. When you do weighting, you have already paid for the material of the product. You have already paid for the worker. So if they don't do anything, that's a waste of the resources that you have paid. So for example, let's say that this is a machine that finishes in 2 hours, and this machine finishes in 5 hours. When this one starts at 12 o'clock, it will move one piece here at 2 o'clock. And this piece will take 5 hours here, so it will finish at 7 o'clock. Likewise, the second one will enter here at 2 o'clock. It will take 2 hours, so it will finish at 4 o'clock. When it comes here at 4 o'clock, it cannot start. Why? Because this is busy. It will finish at 7 o'clock. So we have a waiting waste for 3 hours. These 3 hours are already paid for the material. You have paid already for the material. So you're wasting the resources. You're not gaining money. Because simply, if you have not bought the material, you could have invested your money in something else. So this is a waste. Likewise, if it's the reverse, if the first machine is producing in 5 hours, so this takes 5 hours, and this one produces in 2 hours, and we start at 12 o'clock, and there is one here, and there is one here at 12 o'clock. This will finish at 2 o'clock. This will finish at 5 o'clock. Between 2 o'clock and 5 o'clock, this machine will not be doing anything. At 5 o'clock, when this finishes, then it will go to the next one. So basically, this machine will be waiting for 3 hours. So either the machine is waiting, or the worker is waiting, or the material is waiting. It's a waste of resources. You have paid for resources that is not doing anything so far. The third type is something called transportation. Transportation, it's moving something. So let's say that we produce something in Egypt, in Cairo, and we're selling that item in Alexandria. So we need to transport it from here to there. Likewise, if you produce something in one department and then the next step in another department, then you need to move from this place to that place. This is consuming resources because you need to pay for that transportation. However, the product has not changed. There is no changes in the product. So you've paid money and there is no change in the product. So this is a waste of resources. Some may tell me that when I produce in Cairo, I need any way to transport it into Alexandria because I cannot sell it in Alexandria if it's not transported. This is correct. However, the definition of a non-value adding activity is we paid some money and there is no change in the process, or there is a change in the process that is not useful to the customer. In that case, there is no change in the product. It's the same product. So we consider this transportation, but it's a special, sorry, we call it this waste, but it's a special type of waste. So non-value adding activity or wastes can be divided into two types. Transporting from here to Alexandria, it's a waste of transportation, so this is non-value adding activity. But necessary. What's the meaning of necessary? You cannot sell in Alexandria except that if you ship from here to Alexandria. While moving from one machine to another machine that is far away, this is because you have already put the machine here. You can move the machine to that place. If it's possible, then this is a complete waste. You've done something that you could have not done it. You've done something, you placed the machine here, but you could have not done it. You could haven't put it here, you could have put it here to reduce the distance and to reduce the cost of transportation. So this is a waste. This is the second type, a third type of waste. The following type of waste is called processing. And by processing here, it means doing some extra steps that are not necessary. For example, when we have a flat tire, here is the tire and here are the screws. Most of the time, when we finish, we tie these screws. And most of the time when we finish, most of the time we step on this one, we try to push it down hard and we hear the sound of tick, 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 tick. The sound tick, tick, tick means that you have done extra effort actually than needed. It's already screwed. It's well done. You have already screwed the nuts, and you don't need actually the extra steps of further screwing. So further or excessive or unnecessary steps are complete wastes. This is not necessary. You shouldn't have already done it. Inventory. We produce some products. We put them in the inventory. We wait for a month. We bring them back. We've paid for this duration. We've paid money to store the products inside this warehouse. However, the product has not changed. So you paid money for nothing. We will see later what's the use of the inventory. But so far, it's not a value-adding activity. It's not adding anything to the product. In other words, if you ask the customer, because I paid here $1 more, do you prefer me to sell the product instead of $5? I'll sell it for $6 because I stored it in the inventory? The customer will say definitely no. So the customer does not want the inventory. If you use the inventory, then you're incurring some resources, or you're paying for resources that is not translated into something that the customer wants. The next one, motion. By saying motion, we mean unnecessary or excessive movement. For example, let's say that this is a machine and this is a machine, and we want to transport the product from here to here, and we're using some sort of handling material that takes the product from here, moves it up, then moves in this direction, and then moves it down. What's excessive here? What's more than needed? Actually, what we needed originally is to move from here to here. So this one is needed. Then the extra step of lifting and putting it down is something that is unnecessary. That's an extra step. So this is a waste. Defects. That's worse than all of the above. Defects like scrap, throwing away the product because it's bad, or rework or correction. In other words, you've done something, it turns out to be not a good product, then you need to go again and do the same steps again. So you're doing the steps 2 times in order to produce one product. So this is definitely a waste. According to Canon, there is another 9 types of waste. So we have 7 types of waste. That's the previous classification, and there is another classification here. In that classification, we say that work in process is called a waste. What's meant by work in process? Sometimes we don't carry inventory for raw material, and we don't carry inventory for finished product. So we don't have inventory. So we think that we don't have any inventory, so we don't have inventory wastes. However, when we have a look at the production, it looks like this department has some items that are still in production, and this department has another, and this department has some products, and this department has some products, and there are some products here stored or put on the floor waiting for their turn. So if you have a look here, there are a lot of items that are actually stored. It's stored in process. It's work in process. In other words, we have started one process, but we didn't finish the production. So we put it aside until its turn comes. So it looks like we're carrying a lot of inventory, but this inventory is a work in process inventory. It's not a finished product inventory, and it's not as well a raw material inventory. The second one is defects. As we know, defects is a result of doing a step and the step turns out to be wrong or bad, then we have to adjust the step once again. So we're doing the effort twice. So we're paying twice for the same process. And that's a huge waste. Equipment. How come equipment can be classified as wastes? Equipment in this one means excess or extra equipment. For example, let's say that we need one item and we have 5 in stock. Any equipment, we need one from this one and we have in stock 5 items. That means that we have a waste of 4 items, 4 extra items here. Similar to this, if we have an equipment that is rarely used, you could have rented this equipment instead of buying this equipment. So if you have an equipment that is not used frequently or not used at all, it's called a waste. The second one is expense. And by saying expenses here, as we know, expenses can be classified into something that participates in the production and something that doesn't participate into the production. And this is the waste. Any expenses that are not tracked down into the production are called expenses. For example, if you pay extra money for delivering the product to the customer, that's an expense. So that's something that's waste, especially if it's extra expenses. And anything that doesn't participate to the production is directly called wastes. Indirect labor. By saying indirect labor, we mean anything that's not classified here into wages, but doesn't participate into the production. So this is similar to the word of overheads. For example, if you pay for the security, the wages of the security does not participate in the production. So as a result, this is a waste. Similar to this, the wages of the managers. The managers themselves do not participate in the production. So their wages are considered overheads. So it's a waste. I'm not saying here don't hire managers. However, if you hire managers, don't hire more than needed. Just hire enough to do the work, because they are classified as wastes. They don't participate in adding the value. Planning. One may think when I say planning is a waste, you may think that doing the planning itself is a waste. Actually, you cannot do or you cannot perform a lean process without doing a good planning. So planning in itself is not a waste. Over planning and under planning are wastes. So for example, if the process takes 1 month and then you plan for this process 1 year, so this is over planning. You plan 1 year to do something in 1 month. That's an over planning. And likewise, if it's something that takes 1 year and you plan for it in 2 hours, then probably you haven't invested enough time to make a proper plan. So over planning or under planning are both considered wastes. HR. When we say HR, human resources, when we say that these are wastes, we don't mean that doing the HR itself is a waste. Or what we mean is, if you hire somebody that's not qualified enough to do the process, or overqualified than the process, you hire a PhD holder to do a very simple task, that's an overqualification. That's a waste. Or if you hire a kindergarten student to do some research, he's underqualified. So hiring over or underqualified workers are considered wastes. Operation. How come the operation in itself is classified as wastes? Once again, over or under, doing more than required or doing less than required, both of them are considered waste. So whenever you're doing something that is not necessary, or if you're doing something more than needed, or if you're doing something less than needed, all of these are considered wastes. Startup. One of the main problems in Lean is when we start a machine, we need some time to set up the machine, so setup time. Consider the case that we want to paint a car in black, and then we switch from black to white. So we need to stop the production. We need to adjust the machines with the white color. We need to make some tests that this is the correct color. There is no traces of the black color in them. When we are sure, then we can start the production. So this is called startup or setup time. The problem of the setup time is that it consumes a lot of time and resources, and it's not productive. We don't produce anything. And because it is time consuming, we need to take, when we produce after this one, we need to produce a lot because you're consuming a lot of time here. For example, if we take half a day to do that setup, then the result is when we do that setup, we need to do a lot of items before it. So in other words, because you're spending half a day to adjust from black to white, then when we produce white, we can't just produce one part. We need to produce some parts, because when after finishing the production, we need to stop and switch once again to the next one. So we have to spend another half a day trying to set up the machine again. So startup or setting a machine, both of them are considered a waste, especially that when we are not producing anything in this time. Now, I told you, as I told you before, when you try to solve a waste or when you try to improve a waste, don't look at the symptoms. We need to go to the root cause. In order to go to the root cause, we need to ask ourselves 5 wise questions. In other words, you have to dig deep. You have to ask in details. For example, let's take this example. What was the problem? There is a problem here. What was the problem? The problem is a customer complained because we couldn't serve her. So basically, we are not able to serve a customer. So this is a problem. Then we ask ourselves, why? Because we had run out of stock. Because we don't have inventory. So we couldn't serve a customer. The reason is we didn't have enough inventory. So one may think, as a result of this one, we need to increase the inventory. But if we do further analysis, so we ask ourselves why? Because our suppliers were late in delivering. My suppliers were late in delivering. They delivered the items very late. So the problem now is not in the increasing the inventory. The problem is to change the suppliers because they are late. But as I told you before, you have to go deep into the problem. We need to solve the root cause, not the symptoms. So why were they late? So the next one is why. Because our order was sent in late. So the problem turned out to be late ordering. So the problem now, the solution of the problem is to hire people who are fast in delivering or in the planning or in ordering the products. However, the problem was, after saying another why, because the purchasing department got behind with all its order. So the problem is not for a certain person, it's a problem of the entire department. There is a problem with the procurement department. Why? So the problem now could be replace the people in the purchasing department. However, after we ask why, because it used new staff who were not properly trained. So the problem was actually they have already hired new staff, but this new staff is not properly trained. So the solution is to train them. So as you look here, we shifted from increasing inventory to changing suppliers, to ordering faster, to changing the people in the purchasing department. It turned out that they already have been replaced, but the new ones are not properly trained so far. So the solution is to train. That's a good example to show you that when you try to solve the problem, don't try to solve the symptoms. Try to find what is the root cause. When you have a look here, being late is actually a symptom of hiring non-trained people, HR requirement. So far, we're covering the 5 main principles of the lean. We covered principle number 1, which is customers define value, and then in principle number 2, identify the wastes. Principle number 3, make value flow. In other words, make processes, and in each process try to make sure that this process is value adding activity. Every process you're doing is a value adding activity. However, most of the companies have inventory, and we defined inventory as a waste. So why do we have inventory? The problem of inventory is that we store items so that when you order the items, we find them available. The idea behind the warehouse is that sometimes I'm not able to produce the product fast. So sometimes the production itself is not fast enough. Sometimes the lead time of the material is high. So when you order the material, if you order one item, and then I will have to purchase the material. When you purchase the material, it arrives in 2 or 3 months. So I need to produce and save or store the products in order that when you order the product, you find it. Sometimes when you produce, we produce in large quantities. So when you order one item, I need to produce 10, for example. As you have a look here, the waste in itself is not the inventory in itself is not the problem. It's a symptom. It's a result of something that is not correct. So inventory hides problems and slows flow. Why slows flow? Because when you produce one item and you need to ship the product, you can't ship just one item. So we wait until we have a vehicle that is full, then we ship it. So as it looks from here, it looks like the inventory itself is hiding the problem. It's a simple solution to the problems we have. But if you're good enough in the planning and in the production process, so if you're good enough in the planning and production process, so when you order or when the customer orders one item, you can produce that item. If he orders 10 items, you can just produce exactly 10 items as fast as the customer needs. If he orders 1,000 items, you can produce the 1,000 items as fast as the customer needs. Then, in that case, do we need actually to store the products? No, we don't need to store the products. So the reason behind the storage of the product is whether we are able to produce it as fast enough as the customer requires or not. In other words, if you can produce one fast, then you don't need to store. If you can't produce it fast, then we will store 10. If you're not able to produce 10 fast, then we will store 1,000 and so on. In other words, there are two options that we have. Either we store a lot, so when we store a lot, it covers other main problems. For example, if the product is bad, we have enough inventory, so it covers defects. If we need to move the product, we already have enough products stored. If we have a waste in the transportation, then we have enough inventory to cover the lead time. If there is a waste in the process, we have enough inventory to cover this one. So we store a lot in order to cover a lot of production and planning problems. But as we know, when we store a lot, it's a large waste, and we need to improve it by removing the waste. So we need to remove the waste because it's a non-value adding activity. It's not something that the customer likes or wants. As a result, we need to decrease it. When we decrease it, some other problems may occur. So you need to be good enough to make that decision. In other words, let's say that we sell 2 items per day. And I make a decision to store 10 items. And when we bring the product, the lead time equals 3 days. So you consume two per day, so 10 items is enough for 5 days. What will happen if we store less than 5 days, than 10? So for example, instead of storing 10, we will store 8. We will order 8. If you order 8, then this is enough for 4 days. So we have enough for 4 days. What happens if we store for 2 days? 2 days. If we store for 2 days, we need 4 items. In the third day, we will need extra item. So in the third day, when we order, it will take 3 days. So even if we order here, it will not arrive in the third day. So for example, here, the 4 items that are stored are enough for day number 1, enough for day number 2. If you order here, the product will not arrive except after day number 3. So we don't have product for day number 3. So because we have a problem that the lead time is high, the result is we're storing more items to solve this problem. So we need to at least to store 6 items in order to be able to work efficiently. So in other words, what I want to say is we store because we have something bad in our supply chain. Either the lead time is fast, the production time is the lead time is not fast, slow, the production time takes a lot of time, storage or inspection takes a lot of time, it's expensive to produce one product, the startup time takes a lot. So if we want to produce one item, we spend 1 day to let the machine be ready. So we can't just produce one item, we're going to produce a lot of items. So as a result, the idea that I want to tell you is that because of several bad things in my supply chain, sometimes I'm not able to solve all of these problems. As a result, I store enough inventory to cover the effect of these problems. If you have more problems, you need to store more. So here is more. If you're able to remove some problems, some wastes, you can produce less. You can then store less. Thank you for listening and see you inshallah next week.